I'm Nicola Tallant, and you're listening to Crime World, a podcast about criminals, drugs, and the sins of the underworld. We're Ireland's top podcast for 2025, and now we've got a new website. So if you want to learn more about crime and criminals, if you want stories, extras, and podcast subscriber specials, go to www.crimeworld.com.
Well, I suppose you couldn't really make this up, but in your report, Alan, we had a granny who ultimately would bring a compo case, and there was a car crash, if you want to call it that, and they called to get her cut out of the car. And in the meantime, while they were waiting for the fire brigade or whatever come along, she gets out, goes to the toilet, and then gets back into the car to be cut out in future.
Yeah, it's certainly, you couldn't make it up. This was the Carthy family down in Thai back in 2015. It's actually gone back a long time, but by the time it got to court, it was only finalised there last week. But the Carthy family, they called emergency services. There was 5 members of the family in the car. There was Mary, this is the grandmother. Edward, that's the grandfather. Their 2 sons, Michael and Joe's partner, Rebecca Martin. They were in the car. They called the emergency service, said it was a really bad crash. We're after crashing here. We're all badly injured, you know.
Well, it was a single vehicle?
Single vehicle crash. It was into a pole with a chevron on it on the side of the road. Now, this was about less than a kilometre from their halting site where some of the members of the family lived. So the guards, I think, were the first to respond to the scene. 5 of them were in the car. At that point, Garda Amanda Kirwan gave evidence, who was prosecuting the case, that Mary, the grandmother, had got out of the car. She jumped into the ditch to go to the toilet and then got back into the car. Now, in the meantime, the fire brigade came after she was back in the car, because they said they were seriously injured and they couldn't get out of the car, even though Mary had obviously got to spend a penny.
And of course, the guards described the horrific, damage to the car as being a bit of a bump on the number plate.
Yeah, I think it was even just the surrounding part of the number plate. The number plate was actually okay.
It wasn't
it was the thing that held it was a little bit damaged, and the pole was very minor damage. So basically, the car had no damage to it, essentially. Now, they were all saying they couldn't get out of the car. So a lot of emergency services actually had to arrive on the scene. So 5 ambulances were called to this, because it was 5 people who said they were so badly injured they all needed to go to hospital. 2 fire brigades came around. There was 2 guard cars with 2 guards in each of the car. So as we already established, Mary had got out to go to the toilet. Suddenly she had to get back in and was so injured she couldn't get back out. So they had to use, the big cutters that they used to cut people out of the car.
And then they all got in their individual ambulance.
Yeah, they all had their own ambulance, and went some to different hospitals. So because obviously the hospitals have, there's a major crash, is kind of what they're assuming.
Of course.
So you have 5 people. It's a big issue for hospitals. So they had to be spread out to different hospitals.
And what were they were claiming, they were claiming a non-specific sort of back injuries, really, wasn't it?
Yeah, I think there was neck and back, the usual kind of stuff, but they were saying they couldn't move, essentially. So they couldn't get out of the car on their own, so they had to be cut out. It was so bad.
Okay, so look, they all survived medically. No doubt about that. They all made it through. And then, of course, what happens after is, it was one of the sons, Joe, who was driving the car. Yeah. And presumably then, all 4 of them, was it?
So there was 5 of them in the car. 4 passengers would have lodged claims. I think the reason Joe didn't is because while he was insured, the car wasn't roadworthy, which kind of takes us back to something on the night, which was when the fire brigade lifted the bonnet at the scene. They noticed that the battery wasn't connected. So the car couldn't actually operate. Obviously, a car can't operate without a battery. A car like that can't. So
in order to even hit the pole, it might have had to be, manually propelled.
Yes,
it would be one possibility.
So I think the kind of theory that the guards were working on, and based on the fact that the car wasn't roadworthy, it couldn't move on its own, is that maybe that they pushed the car into the pole. It was very close to where they lived, and that is the theory I suppose they were working on, is that they got out of the car and they pushed it into the pole.
So they all lodged their compo claims, all 4 of them. And that was 2015, presumably they lodged it straight away. And what sort of, I don't know if people sue in that case for specific amounts of money, but you're talking four people's claims. Was there a figure given at?
There was a figure given in court of
was it 150?
150 grand, and I think that would have included kind of court costs and stuff like that had it gone ahead. So I think the maximum in the circuit court, which is what they were going, would have been 60 each. So you could multiply 60 by 4.
Yeah,
you'd actually get more than that. But I think the if you included costs and all that, but I think that the figure Liberty Insurance or the insurance put it out it would have been about 150 grand.
So I suppose when you get, like, what happens with the insurance companies is if the claims are sort of within this sort of grey or of a certain financial value, they're tempted sometimes to settle them to get rid of them rather than go to court.
Yeah, and I think historically as well, there was definitely situations where people were kind of,
maybe if they're looking for 10, let's say,
almost,
10
you'd
grand.
nearly call it F-off money, if you know what I mean. It's like, right, the cost of actually defending this is going to be so much, even just to prepare for it, and even if they don't win, we're going to be at a loss of a certain amount. So I think back in the day, a lot more insurance companies would have paid out small amounts just to make things go away.
Yeah.
But that's shifted now in the last decade or so, where you've got a lot more insurance companies going, no, we're going to actually challenge a lot of these things because we know how dodgy, like there has been an issue in Ireland over the years of a lot of dodgy insurance claims, which are frauds, basically.
Yeah. So this really didn't work out for them because while, like you've done, regularly do the Compo claims that go wrong for people, often on the basis that people claim chronic injuries and then put themselves up on Facebook doing all sorts of
you've had people doing like MMA or doing weights and doing all this intense training. You've got everything to do with that. And
so you've done loads of them where the case is just thrown out and they end up with a legal bill or whatever. But this one is different in that probably because of it was so extreme that they ended up with criminal prosecutions, and that's the case you covered last week.
Yeah, and it wasn't just for, sometimes they put them in for certain offences. It might be defrauding or whatever, fraud offences and stuff like that. And this one, they actually got charged with conspiracy as well, that they all entered into conspiracy together to carry out a fraud. So that was kind of even a higher charge, which is kind of more serious. Like some conspiracy charges you've seen, like, this isn't the case of it, but in other ones, like gangs would have been targeted, organised crime gangs would have been targeted with these conspiracy charges. So this, now, obviously, it's on a much lesser level. They're staging a car crash. But they did use that legislation. And I think it was the judge kind of praised Garda Amanda Kirwan for putting the case together. Like, she was a regular guard. She wasn't a detective who came on the scene. And I think she put a lot of effort in to kind of, put that case together. And it seemed to, she got all her ducks in a row
and they got done, like but they also got charged with deception, is it? Which is another kind of serious charge, and an example of that would be the Carlow post office guys, the very famous case where they, infamous I suppose would be accurate, but where the one guy claimed his uncle's pension by bringing his uncle's dead body to the post office, but he got a couple of years. So it is again, that's a more serious charge. But they pled not guilty as well, all 5 of them, didn't they?
Yeah, and I think this is probably what really backfired for them because, if you hear what I told you there about getting out of the car, the battery not being connected, all these things, like straight away, look, you're not going to be able to defend yourselves when you go to court.
Yeah.
Despite them knowing that that's the evidence. A book of evidence is served on people before you go to trial. So you know what the evidence is going to be against you. And they still, and I think the judge did say to them beforehand, like, if you do go ahead with this, now obviously they're more than entitled to go to trial and everything like that. She made that very clear. But she also said if you do and you lose, you will lose a very serious part of mitigation. If I'm sentencing you then. And obviously that's what happened. They lost. So this was a 6-day trial. You had multiple, you've all the Garda witnesses, you have the people on the scene. I think there was John O'Donnell, who was a senior investigator with Liberty Insurance. There was different engineers. All these people had to come and give evidence, even though I read out to you there what was presented in it. It's kind of slam dunk in terms of the prosecution, but all these people still had to come to court. Had to, like, there's a lot of money behind all that.
Totally, and there's a jury. It was a jury trial. So
a jury who came back, I think, quite quickly with the guilty verdicts.
So what is the final sentence that they all received? There was some getting longer sentences than others, or? Yeah,
it was a mixture. So I suppose the longest sentence, I think, Michael and Joe kind of, the two... the two sons kind of got longer sentence. So I think for all of them, really, they got 2-year sentences. However, the judge suspended larger parts and smaller parts depending on the person. So Edward and Mary, the granny and granddad, they got the 2 years, but it was reduced to 6 months due to mitigation. They have health issues. They're in their 70s. lots of issues like that. And then it went up slightly for some of the other people.
Yeah.
I think the maximum was about a year.
Yeah.
And a month.
Yeah, I think the son's got 2 years with 12 months suspended. Joseph, who's 32, got 2 years with 9 months suspended, and his girlfriend was given 2 years with 15 months suspended. So they all got, they all got the same sentence, but different degrees.
Different degrees. Suspension depend on their mitigation and their age and things.
But like that. So even when the guilty verdict, it sounds like a slam dunk case, it still didn't go down well in the courthouse because there was a bit of chaos, was there, at that moment as well?
Some of the members of the family got upset. I think Rebecca, from a recollection, got upset because when the judge, you've been at court cases before, the judge will go through as they deliver their verdict, and before saying it, they'll give indications. So in it, she basically said all their lawyers had argued, and they all had their own barristers. Yeah. There's 5 barristers who were there for them, but which they're obviously entitled to. Yeah. But they were all looking for suspended sentences for all of them and hoping that would happen. The judge made it clear that, I did say about the mitigation that you wouldn't have by going to trial. And now the other thing I should say is that they did all accept in mitigation that it was a fraud. So they said, okay, I know we pleaded not guilty, but they all said, actually, look, it was actually a scam. We hold our hands up now and admit it. So I think the judge was upset about the fact that they'd gone to trial, knowing that they're trying to deceive the court and the jury. There was also a couple of issues that were brought up during the closing statements, not for all the defendants, but for a couple of them, suggesting that maybe they wouldn't have been investigated in the first place had they not been members of the travelling community. And I think the judge took that as a terrible smear on some of the witnesses there to suggest, because, as you see by the evidence, it's not because they're members of the travelling community, it's because there was blatant evidence there that this was not a real car crash.
I mean, there was funny bits of it as well, that even as they're staging this, they didn't put on the seatbelts even, and all of that, which again you would have thought.
It seems like a small thing, but once again in court they claimed that they had the seatbelts on. So what happened when the guards came along is that they looked in and it looked like they had seatbelts on, so they were across their chests or whatever. Yeah. But when the engineers looked at the car afterwards, they found that the thing that you click the seatbelt in, the receptor or whatever for, were below the seats, and the glass was in on top of them. From it, so they couldn't have been. But it's a minor matter, but it's another lie.
It is.
Rich tapestry.
So it's an interesting development, of course, because we did go through, I think, a stage of where people, as you said, were really getting these settlements out of court at low money. Like, there has been a change from the insurance companies. Do they pick out particular cases to fight, I think, more and more? And if they really feel they're going to win, they don't seem to worry about the costs.
They do. And there's certainly cases where they think, look, this could go either way, but we want to put a marker down that we're not paying out on these cases. We're not just going to pay money for them to go away. So there's a fair few different insurance companies now around the country doing it, and they're just they're taking that more proactive approach to say, no, you know what, we need this to stop. So we're going to just challenge a lot of these things. And a lot of them, when they do get to court, when they're challenged, they can fall apart very easily.
They can, and they can just not even continue the case at all. Well, we leave the final words to Judge Desmond Ziden, who does give good quotes, doesn't he, at times?
Great quotes.
He's like, if you're going to attend a case, you want somebody like him. And one of his quotes was, "I've heard of dumb criminals, but this beats them all."
Well, I'd say, I'd just like to point out for that one, that wasn't actually...
Oh, that wasn't him? That was
it was Desmond Ziden, but that was actually... that was their grandson, John Paul, who was referring to, who he was Edward and Mary's grandson. He was in court earlier this year. He had nothing to do with the crash, but he is related to them. He was in court earlier this year before Judge Ziden, because he broke into a shop overnight and... to plan to rob it, and then when everyone had left, he was hiding in the toilets. He came out of the toilets. The shop was locked. He got trapped in the shop while he was trying to burgle it, and he had to call the guards to come and rescue him. That's what Judge Ziden was referring to.
Okay, well, look, possibly runs in the family, so let's leave it at that. Thanks, Alan.
Thanks.